Hi there. My name is Laura Lundquist, and I am a physiotherapist and founder here of the Clubs Ed Fitness program. And I'm really excited that you're going to spend a few minutes with me talking about or learning about sleep as a foundation to better health. Here at Clubs Ed, we spend a lot of time talking about exercise, and you'll see that that's going to come up again. But but we don't also as often talk about sleep and how important sleep is to making sure that we are able to enjoy an active lifestyle and live our best life. So that is what we are here for today. Just as a reminder, our goal here at Club Ed is to empower our members with the skills and knowledge that they need to get the most out of their lives. And we really hope that that is true for you. And again, that this little piece about sleep helps you do that just a little bit better. A little bit more about me, just in case you don't know me, is that I am a registered physiotherapist and have been since 2003. Early in my career, I worked in elite sports medicine, really right up until about 2017. And then in 2018, I opened Zoomers Physiotherapy and Health Solutions in Halifax and then Spring Physiotherapy in Dartmouth in 2024, really trying to bring a sports medicine approach to health and fitness services for all adults in our community, particularly for those 55 and up. And then we founded the Clubs Ed Fitness program back in 2021, again, with this desire to bring strength, balance, and mobility work, as you may already know, to adults 55 and up in the community. Whether we see you in person or we work with you strictly online, it's really about helping you optimize that strength, balance, and mobility in order to be able to continue enjoying the life that you love and the activities that you love with your family and friends. So, how does sleep play into all of that? And why am I here talking about sleep? Well, the three questions we are going to consider are, first of all, what is it really? Why does it matter? And how can we optimize it? Now, some of you might have really, that first picture might have really resonated with you, with the woman looking very comfortable and calm, sleeping in her bed, fast asleep, hopefully dreaming good dreams. For others, some of these other images may feel a little bit more like the nights that you feel happen to you. And so let's talk about, what sleep is, why it matters, and then what we can do to optimize it to make sure we can get all the benefits that it really can bring us. This photo is of my daughter, who is currently, as I record this, just over 9 years old. So obviously, this picture was a few years ago. She looks as though she's not doing much of anything other than sucking that thumb. But really, when we're sleeping, it isn't just downtime. It is where your body does its most important maintenance work. And it truly is this biological recovery process. And what I mean by that is that it really is an active state where both your brain and your body are doing critical work to help you be able to be at your best the next day. Our brains are processing information and consolidating memory so that we can remember what we did yesterday, hopefully. Our nervous system is going through a reset so that we can take perhaps the stress and anxiety that we may have felt in during the day, and then the body can process that. The nervous system can reset so that we wake up without those feelings, hopefully, of anxiety and stress. So, recovery from the nervous system perspective. And then there's also recovery that is happening in our tissues. So, from a physio perspective, I think a lot about the muscles and the joints. But from an immune system perspective, there's also repair and recovery happening there where we're fighting off illness. And so, again, it is not just this sort of downtime or being quote unquote lazy, as we might sometimes think of it. It is truly this active state where there's a lot of biological work going on to help you be able to get the most out of your next day. So then what happens when you don't get enough? And if you're joining this by recording, just take a moment, maybe even pause it here and just jot down, a few things that you might notice about yourself when you're not getting enough sleep. And then once you've had the chance to do that and you've got a few things written down, then you can go ahead and, again, if you're watching the recording, press play and then carry on. So, what you might notice on your list are some physical health issues that are noticeable when we're not getting enough sleep. One of them here is decreased regulation of hormones. So we often, because of this dysregulation of hormones, we can notice changes in our energy levels, right? Perhaps not having as much energy. Oftentimes we have changes in our appetite, often an increase in our appetite. And often we can feel as though we are living in a higher stress environment in terms of how our body is feeling. We also see that with decreased sleep, there is decreased immune function. Remember, we talked about sleep being an active recovery process during which the immune system is working to fight off illness. So if it's not getting that time, we can find ourselves with increased frequency of coming down with colds and flus and all the rest of it. Another interesting one is that with less sleep, we have increased pain sensitivity. And so this means that an injury that, might have had we'll just call it like a baseline level of discomfort, might actually feel worse than that baseline simply because you're not getting enough sleep and our body has a harder time tolerating the irritability of those tissues. We also see that with chronic low levels of sleep, there's an increased risk of chronic health conditions developing. And then we see that acute conditions, so sprains, strains, these kinds of issues, can actually have reduced healing and recovery capacity. So increased amount of time for healing and recovery for these more acute issues. So we're more likely to develop a chronic health condition, and it's harder for us to recover from these more acute situations. We also see on the injury side of things that we are, in fact, more likely to develop these injuries because when the body is tired, we tend to move differently. And when we move differently, we often can create situations where small issues become bigger ones. Perhaps with repetitive strain injuries, if we're consistently reaching up for something and that movement is happening in an altered way because we're tired and we're just not really paying attention. We also see that because of this attention factor, we can see that workplace injuries or injuries at home with things falling out of cupboards or tripping over things, those things can happen more frequently just because we're not paying as much attention to our environment. And then, following up on that, sometimes it might be a stumble or trip, and sometimes it might actually result in a full-on fall, which can certainly result in more injury. So these are the kinds of physical things that we see happening when we are not getting enough sleep. And this just sort of brings it all into focus here. So a weaker immune system, again, weight gain and reduced metabolism, perhaps lower energy and increased levels of fatigue. We can see from a chronic health condition perspective that heart disease becomes a bigger issue. Joint pain and inflammation is a bigger issue. Slower recovery and healing, we talked about that. So really, sleep is not, from a physical health perspective, a luxury. It is a necessity. Better sleep means you can have a stronger body, and that means you can have a better you and a better lifestyle. So those are the physical things, but that's not the only consideration. Lack of sleep also can have a negative impact on our mental health. So, the worse we sleep, the smaller our capacity is to handle normal life stresses. And I'm sure if you take a moment to think back to the last time you didn't get a good night's sleep and how well you handled the little hiccups that happened the following day, you can probably start to see that those hiccups that you might have otherwise been able to just sort of coast right through, they start to create a little bit more challenge for us through the days. And because of that, we tend to feel more reactive, we less resilient when faced with these challenges. And these feelings of feeling sort of overtaxed and that we don't have the capacity to handle what's coming at us can really contribute to the development of significant mental health challenges. So now we have not just the physical health issues, but also the mental health issues that come along with poor sleep. And the repercussions on our lives are really there's a direct impact again on our ability to focus, on our ability to make decisions. Because of that, we often see that there's impact on productivity. And then for sure, when we don't feel like we have the capacity to handle those challenges easily, communication can become an issue and patience can become an issue. And so if we are operating with less focus, not as good decision making, reduced productivity, challenges with communications and patience, we often see that people who are sleep deprived are making more errors, having more conflict, and experiencing more burnout in their lives. So, there are the physical health things, the mental health things, and then there's how that actually shows up for us in our life, and how it impacts what we're able to do and enjoy, and how we're going, really going through our lives. So, what are the now that we've talked about, excuse me, talked about the implications of not getting enough sleep, I want you to think about what are the biggest sleep challenges that you face. And again, if you're watching this recording, this is a great time to just pause it and take a moment to just reflect on, is it getting to sleep? Is it staying asleep? Is it being comfortable? What are the things that make it difficult for you to get as much sleep as might be helpful for you? And actually, before you press pause, this is a good spot to say, how much sleep is enough? Well, the general recommendations for Canadians are from the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiology are anywhere from 7 to 9 hours of sleep for adults age 18 to 64, and anywhere from 7 to 8 hours for adults 65 and older. So it's somewhere in that sweet spot of 7 to 9 hours that you should be shooting for. So think about, what gets in the way of you being able to get a good 7 to 8, 9 hours of sleep. All right. So press pause now if you're ready, jot your notes down, and then join back when you're ready to keep going. So now that you've got your list of things that get in the way, let's look at a series of hacks that you might be able to use to hopefully resolve some of those things that are getting in the way. I've divided them out here into environment and self. So we'll go through the environment list first, and then we'll finish with the self environment or the self list. On the environment side of things, avoiding screens, which you've probably heard before, 30 to 60 minutes before bed, it can be really helpful for people. And it's because the blue light in the screen actually stimulates a gland in your brain, that the pineal gland, that tells you, oh, the lights are on, it's daytime, it's time to be awake. And when that gland is stimulated, it's harder for your body to settle in and get ready to sleep. So it can take you longer to settle back down once you put the screen down. You can, of course, use some of those blue light reducers on your screens, and that can be helpful. But the other thing is, often the thing that we're looking at on the screen is also stimulating and sometimes can be stressful or exciting. And in either case, stressful and exciting things that sort of amp up our physiology also make it harder for us to drop down into that active recovery process of sleep. So, trying to avoid that kind of stimulation, both through the blue light and also just the content that you might be engaging with on the screen, is helpful to step away from it 30 to 60 minutes before you go to sleep. Dimming the lights in the evening as a signal to your body that bedtime is coming can be really helpful. If you think about it, humans were designed really to be living outside, and Mother Nature tells us when bedtime is coming. Slowly dusk comes, and then slowly nighttime sets in. And so, if you create that same kind of environment in your physical environment inside, that can help you signal to your body that sleep is coming soon. The other thing is keeping your core temperature cool. And so we actually need our core temperature to go down by a degree or two when we fall asleep. And so keeping the bedroom cool can help signal your body and help make it a little bit easier for that to happen. The other thing you can do is either take a hot shower 60 to 90 minutes before bedtime or wear a pair of warm socks. Both of those things cause your body to vasodilate or increase the size of the blood vessels. And when we do that, that cools our body down. And so if you wear warm socks to bed, if you can handle socks to bed, or if you have that warm shower 60 to 90 minutes before you plan to go to sleep, again, that's helping your body know that sleep is coming because the temperature, the internal temperature is lowering. The other thing in environment that as a physio, I spend a lot of time talking to people about is consider your positioning choices. So if you have hip osteoarthritis or a back that prefers a certain position, it's important to make sure that you think about positioning yourself for comfort before you're uncomfortable, hopefully, so that you're able to get the longest period of sleep without being uncomfortable. I typically suggest people try to avoid sleeping on their belly because being on your stomach causes your lower back to arch, and oftentimes that is not well tolerated over a long course of time while we're sleeping. And also, if we're lying on our stomach, usually the head and neck have to be turned to one extreme or the other. And more often than not, people find that that's not uncomfortable or not comfortable for the duration of the night. The other thing is avoiding being propped up too heavily on pillows if you're lying on your back so that you're almost in a semi-sitting position. When we're in that position, there's a lot more pressure on the lower back, and that can create discomfort there. And also, if we're too propped up underneath our head and neck, for some of us, myself included, that would definitely promote some neck pain. So we just want to be careful about how heavily propped up we are, and perhaps avoiding being on your belly if you can. The other thing that's helpful from an environment perspective is just trying to keep a fairly consistent sleep time and wake up time. And that's because that helps sort of tap into a circadian rhythm in your body. And it being on that rhythm just helps your body know, okay, it's time to be up and ready for action versus, okay, it's time to go into active recovery mode for sleep. So those are our hacks on the environment side. There certainly are others, but that's the list that I've got for you today. Then we have our list on the self side. So on the self side, avoiding heavy meals late in the evening can be helpful for sure, because if our digestive system is really working hard, our core temperature is going to be higher and our body is busy digesting and not able to drop into that active recovery process of sleep quite the same way. So it can delay our ability to get into good quality sleep. Also, thinking about avoiding caffeine, especially after noon, can be helpful. Caffeine is a stimulant, so it can, for people in varying degrees, it can be between 2 hours and 12 hours for a body to process the caffeine and to not be affected by it anymore. So it is quite individual. But in either case, it does, for most people, have a bit of a stimulating impact. And so you want to just try to make sure that you're limiting it at least 5 to 7 hours before you go to sleep, but hopefully maybe not having it afternoon. Alcohol also can disrupt sleep and disrupt our deep sleep or our quality sleep. So, thinking about responsible alcohol intake or reducing our alcohol intake if we feel like that's having an impact for us is something that we can do. Considering having a wind down routine can be really helpful. Again, on the same idea of thinking about dimming the lights and keeping the bedroom cool, maybe having that shower. So, those environmental things we can do with ourselves. So, perhaps doing some meditation, some light, gentle stretching, or some reading, and having that happen sort of routinely so that when that process starts each evening, our body knows then that that's a cue that sleep is coming. And sometimes for people who, especially for people who struggle to get to sleep, that can be a really helpful way to kind of ease yourself into it. Managing injuries, again, this goes with sleep position. Managing injuries to reduce nighttime pain is really important because pain will often wake people up from sleep. And so we want to try to reduce nighttime pain to try to reduce those sleep interruptions if we can. And then the last one here is exercise. No surprise. I left this one for last because we're going to dive into exercise a little bit more so that you can understand how exercise hopefully is helping you already and how it can help you maybe even a little bit more. It really is a magic bullet. It increases our deep sleep or the restorative phase of sleep. It can reduce how long it takes you to get to sleep if we're getting adequate exercise and activity in the day. It helps regulate body temperature and can encourage that necessary drop before we go to sleep. It helps reduce stress and anxiety, and we know that that is helpful in terms, again, of helping people fall asleep at night. And it boosts our natural melatonin production. So, melatonin is a supplement that some people use to help them get to sleep, but exercise can actually give you your own natural melatonin boost just by engaging in that physical activity. The timing of the exercise is, in terms of where it's beneficial, is can be quite variable to the individual. So there's a little bit of trial and error that needs to be happening. A lot of people will find that avoiding intense exercise close to bedtime is probably helpful. Really intense exercise, again, tends to be fairly stimulating, especially if you're doing something like playing a game of hockey or something where you're also sort of emotionally invested in what's going on. That, again, is just so stimulating. It can take a while for your body to be able to drop down, but it is quite variable between people. And so you need to listen to what works best for you. Here's just a little infographic that can give you some ideas for starting points, and then again you can play with it to see what holds true for you, and perhaps you prefer to do it in a different way, and that is by no means wrong, right? It's really what works for you. So generally speaking, we might advise doing aerobic or resistance exercise in the morning, that we think it might actually help stimulate some melatonin release later in the evening. I find that myself, if I exercise intensely early in the morning, I do find that I'm ready for bed. I'm tired in the evening when it's bedtime, right? I sort of feel ready for bed. High intensity exercise in the afternoon may promote sound sleep by reducing wakefulness, so helping you get to sleep and stay to sleep. And then this lighter work or gentle aerobic exercise in the evening may help reduce nighttime weakenings. So again, there's no perfect answer here. It's really what works for you. But generally speaking, the one biggest rule of thumb would be trying to avoid that really intense exercise right before bed. Just again, because it can have that stimulating impact. So now I want you to stop for a moment and think, what's your next step, right? If ideally we know getting between 7 and 9 hours of sleep is probably the sweet spot. How are you doing in comparison to that? Do you have consistent bedtime and wake up time? Are you waking up feeling rested? And are you staying asleep for the duration of the night, or do you feel a little bit restless? And then think about those optimization hacks that we talked about and which ones might be relatively easy for you to implement. The more of those things you can do, probably the more and more high quality sleep you can get, and the more energized you can feel, and you can help avoid some of those physical health, mental health, and life impact consequences we talked about as being an issue with reduced sleep. So again, take a moment, think about what your challenges were, think about the hacks that might work for you, and then take a moment to think about what you can start to implement. Because remember that sleep quality and quantity is changeable. Your body can do it. But you might just need the right starting point with some of these things we've talked about, and maybe a little help along the way. And so we're certainly here to help you do that. Should you feel like you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us through Club Z, and we will do our best to answer your questions. But I wish you a happy, healthy day full of physical activity and a wonderful night's sleep. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye.